So what have you missed most over the past 15 months or so? I'm sure there have been lots of things, not being able to see and hug our family, other than those we live with, not being able to come to church and meet with our friends for quite a while, not being able to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, not being able to attend funerals and mourn the loss of family members and friends, not being able to comfort those we know who are suffering. There are so many things that we are missing, which makes me think of some of the things that I miss really are quite trivial in the context of those that I've just mentioned. Now, don't get me wrong, I do miss all of the things that I listed, but I do also miss other things which in the big scheme of things are less important, but which are nevertheless missing in my life. I miss going on holiday. I miss a good pub lunch, particularly one with friends to chat and socialise with. Jesus always enjoyed meeting people, socialising with them. And if this involves some food and some wine, then so much the better. In fact, his first miracle was to turn water into wine. And a very good wine it was as well. This was at the wedding in Cana. And I think we can assume that there was also good food and a party atmosphere at such an occasion as well. He ate a great feast at the house of Levi the publican, as well as eating with Simon the Pharisee on occasion when his feet were anointed with expensive perfume. He ate with 4,000 or 5,000 people when he fed them with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He enjoyed the company of Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. And of course, on a more somber occasion, he shared bread and wine with his disciples at the Last Supper. Now, this passage that we heard from John's Gospel tells of something that took place after Jesus' resurrection. And in many ways, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride because it talks about good days and bad days turning into good days. Now, I guess we all have good days and bad days. And in many ways, the story begins with a bad day for the disciples because they were out fishing and it wasn't yet breakfast time. They were clearly at a loose end, not knowing what to do with themselves after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. So Peter said he was going fishing, and some of the others decided that they would go along with him too. So we've all had some of these times in our lives when there's been such upheaval that we just long for a bit of normality. I'm sure we're getting at that stage now with all the lockdowns. I know we're gradually getting out of it, but there's still restrictions, and we still don't know whether we can come and go with any degree of normality, whether indeed we can go on holiday or not, or whether lockdown is going to be extended yet again as the case rates go up. To the disciples, well, at least those who were fishermen, going out fishing on Lake Galilee represented a bit of normality to them. Unfortunately, they'd been out all night and had caught nothing. They were tired and they were hungry. The sun was rising and they were heading back to shore when they saw this man on the beach. "Good morning," he said. "Did you catch anything for breakfast?" And the answer was no. So the man went on and said, "Well, try throwing your net over the other side of the boat and see what happens." Now you have to remember that they hadn't recognized Jesus at that point. So here was this stranger telling them, professional fishermen, how to do their job. Yet there must have been something about this man that made them obey, because they did what he said. They threw their nets over the other side of the boat, and they caught loads of fish, 153 to be precise. Now, why it was 153, I have no idea. Did they count them? I suspect that 153 was probably the limit of the known varieties of fish in those days. So basically, they caught something of every variety. But it was then that they realized exactly who it was on the shore. So they hauled their catch on board and they headed back to where Jesus was. By the time that they'd arrived, Jesus had got a fire going and he was able to cook them breakfast on the beach. Probably the best barbecue of them all. I remember a few years ago doing some work with a company in Volos in Greece. Maybe you've been to Volos yourselves. It's a nice little coastal town. And one evening they took me to this little restaurant up a back street in Volos. And it was packed with locals. The tables were just rough wood. There were plates of chunks of bread on the table. There were jugs of wine on the table. And the fish just kept coming and coming. Maybe not as many as 153, but a lot of fish, nevertheless. And I've always felt that this was the closest I'd come to having the kind of meal that John talks about in this passage. Really, though, despite Michael Giles' suggestion that I should talk about the Sermon on the Mediterranean diet, this story is not about food. This story is about love and forgiveness. Firstly, it's about Jesus meeting Peter's needs, helping him with his work and providing rest and food, all as an act of love from Jesus to Peter. So a bad day for Peter turned into a good one. But then it all looked as though it was going to turn bad again for Peter, because Jesus asked him one of those awkward questions. You know the kind. You go to the doctor for a checkup and he or she asks you how many units of alcohol you drink a week and how many portions of fruit and veg you have each day. You know what the answers should be, and you know what the answers really are. So Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? And the reason this was an awkward question for Peter was that because the should be answer was not because the should be answer and the real answer were different. Both answers were yes. The reason it was awkward was that it touched a raw nerve with Peter. Only a week or two earlier, he'd been asked 3 times if he knew Jesus. And 3 times he'd denied him. Not exactly an act of love to say that he wasn't a friend of Jesus. And to mirror this, Jesus asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? This would have brought back to Peter even more clearly the memories of his failure. Jesus could have given Peter a lecture on how he should have behaved, on what it means to love your friends, but he didn't. He didn't punish him. He didn't tell him off. And so this roller coaster day for Peter got better again. Every time Jesus asked him if he loved him, Peter answered, Master, you know I love you. And he was right. Jesus did know. But he wanted Peter to say it out loud. Jesus died on the cross so people could be forgiven. And he put this into practice by forgiving Peter for his denials. He also gave him a job to do. He told him to feed his sheep and his lambs. Not literally sheep and lambs, but people. People like you and me. And not with bread and fish, but with spiritual food and with love. Jesus used the events of that morning to remind Peter of why he, Jesus, had come to earth. Things that he would need to know and to keep in mind as he and the other followers of Jesus began to build his church here on earth. We sometimes have bad days, but as with Peter, they're never so bad that we can't involve Jesus in them, because he wants to help us and he wants to love us. He also wants to forgive us for the times when we let him down. But in order for him to do that, we need to acknowledge the things that we've done wrong. So the passage is not about food. It's about the love and the forgiveness that Jesus can give. The love and the forgiveness that he can give to you. Amen.